excited to be presenting this plenary today on access to play in crisis. And as Janet said, it really came about because at the last conference in 2014 in Istanbul, we had started to do some work around this theme. We were very conscious that the conference was being held in an area where people were really affected by displacement and war and conflict, and we felt we really needed to draw some attention. The members of IPA were really saying, we need to start to think about how we can do something about this. So we held a special workshop, and as a result, there was a conference resolution in 2014 for IPA to really try to do a bit more work on this. And we're delighted now that 3 years on at this conference, we're actually able to present some solid pieces of work that we've been able to do together. And we had some project funding that's helped us to do it. And we've had a partnership model with our teams around the world who've been able to put some really great work together for us. So delighted that we have this opportunity to share all of that with you. Now, we have a few changes to our programme. Unfortunately, we had some difficulties. Some of our delegates had some difficulties with travel arrangements. This can happen, but we had a biggish team, so we've been able to do some changes. We're very sorry not to have Maria Assi, who's from Beyond Association in Lebanon. Unfortunately, in Beirut, they weren't able to get the travel arrangements made, so she's not here with us today. And neither is Santosh Maharjan, who ran our research in Nepal, and we're very sad not to have him. However, we do have other members of the team here, and we're very delighted that we've got so much to share with you. On that note, I'm not going to do long introductions to all of the panel because I think we really want to spend the time just sharing what we found out. But like yesterday, we have a talking circle this afternoon, and that's an opportunity where our speakers and our researchers can tell you a bit more about the background, their background, why they were involved, and so forth. So I'll keep that element of it simple. I'm just going to give a little bit of an overview before we get started and before I hand over to our panel. As I said, one of the starting points was the conference in 2014 when we identified the need for some serious work around children's play in situations of crisis. We know there are huge gaps in knowledge. There's not much evidence, or there hasn't been very much research that looked at children's play and play for play's sake. So there's a certain amount that's been about play as therapy or play as a means to another end, but very little that's about children's own play under children's own agency, where children have control over the play, the kind of play that we were talking about yesterday. The second starting point for us was another really important one, and is also within the kind of realm of work that IPA has been very much involved in, and that is the general comment on Article 31 from the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child. I think many of you will be familiar with that, and one of the paragraphs, it's actually paragraph 53, because I know every paragraph number, talks about how in situations of emergency, whether that's crisis, disaster, man-made or natural disasters, play is often given a very low priority. However, a much lower priority than the provision of food, medicine and shelter. However, the UN Children's Committee themselves have talked about how play helps children to really recover a sense of normality, joy, the pleasure of childhood, and to work through their experiences of loss or dislocation and trauma. So the UN Children's Committee have started to give us a direction to think more about this, and a challenge to think about how we can make some changes, encourage changes amongst the agencies who work in disaster and emergency relief. So we've been doing all this work. We know that children themselves display huge amount of resilience in creating spaces and opportunities to play in all sorts of circumstances. I'm sure many of you will have experience of that and seen that in your work. And we also know that many communities and many organisations do things that try to support children to play, to find space for play, to give them time for play. But at the same time, we know a huge amount more needs to be done, and that we have obligations to children, and we need to find out how those obligations can be fulfilled. So, for the last 2.5 years or so, we've been working on 2 projects in tandem. One, the development of a toolkit, a practical toolkit for staff, managers and policymakers, which helps people to understand what they might do in a practical sense in terms of delivering and supporting, facilitating children's play. We had a workshop about that yesterday, which I understand was really well received, and we've got copies of that toolkit in slight short supply in hard copy, but we've got PDFs of the toolkit which are very easily accessible. And the second piece of work is the one that we're going to focus on in the plenary today, which is about researching play in crisis situations. And this is hot off the press. It was finished in the last few weeks. The typewriters have been red hot, and the design work's all been done, and we have again, hard copies and PDF of the research to present. I won't go too much into the detail of it, but we were looking at research questions around things like, how does crisis affect children's right to play in their everyday lives? How do children cope with that situation? What is the role of adults and community organisations in promoting the right to play? What importance do humanitarian disaster risk reduction organisations place on children's play rights? And what are the lessons for promoting the right to play in situations of crisis? What works? You know, do we know what works in order to support children? We were very fortunate in being able to use the networks of IPA and the connections of IPA to build this research project, and to be able to find researchers who are really able to kind of spend time right at children's level in all sorts of different situations, finding out what life was like for them. And I was reminded yesterday when Roger was speaking about the research that he did and was revisiting, where he said at the time when he did his original research, I think it was 30 odd years ago, he was kind of able to wander in and out of children's lives and find out what their day-to-day lives were like by spending a lot of time with them in a very natural kind of way. And when he was saying that, it really rang some bells for me, because I was thinking, actually, that's been one of the characteristics of this project, when at least sort of 4 out of the 6, I would say, that our researchers have been able to wander in and out of the lives of the children, spend quiet time with them, you know, just be part of the rhythm of children's day in order to understand what the play really is like for those children. And it has been enormously illuminating, I must say, absolutely fascinating research, and little windows of the worlds of children that we just wouldn't have had otherwise. So we're really enormously grateful for the partners we were able to work with in different countries who were able to do that very carefully and very painstakingly with the children in a very playful and joyful way. The research took place between November 2016 and March 2017, so it's a shortish period of time, and was in 6 countries. So we have a regional partnership model, which IPA has used fairly consistently for the last sort of 6 or 8 years to do this type of work. Each of the projects were very different contexts. I'm only going to say a little bit about them, but just to give a sense of the overview, the research projects took place in India, Japan, Lebanon, Nepal, Thailand and Turkey. So 2 in the Middle East and 4 in Asia. This is our team. 2 of the meetings in Bangkok and where were we? In Delhi. So we've had a fantastic team of people who've been able to come together and work together. And we didn't send researchers into these contexts. What we did was find organisations and partners who were already working with children in the communities that where we were wanting to look at the situation. So we weren't sort of parachuting people in, which was a very important part. And we had quite good fun when we did get together. So before moving on, I just wanted to give, well, that was the overview, give a little bit of a sense of what we're planning to do with the session this morning. We've got quite a packed programme, so it's going to be quite tight. But as I say, we have got the talking circle this afternoon if people would really like to engage a bit more with it. So what we will be doing is we have a short film to show you in a few minutes, which gives you an overview and some lovely images of the spaces where the research took place. Sudeshna Chatterjee, who's sitting here to my right, is the project officer. IPA was able to employ Sudeshna, which was an absolute lifesaver for us, I must say. And Sudeshna has held the whole of these projects together and led the way with them. So she'll be giving an overview of the research and some of the major findings that we've had. And then we're going to move to our panel, who will each give us a glimpse of what they were finding out and observing within the projects, the research projects they ran in their country. So our panellists, when we come to them, are Kemporn Varunrapan, who's from Thailand, Shalini Gupta, who's from India, and Isami Kinoshita, who's from Japan. Once we've done that, we'll have maybe a few moments for questions at the end. So with no more ado, I think we're going to move to the film, and then I'll hand over to Sadeshna after the film. It was really important for us to find out more about how children play in situations of crisis. Because of what we already know about the importance of play to children, we know that play is fundamental to their health, to their development, to their well-being, and to the sheer fun and enjoyment of being a child. Now, in difficult circumstances, in situations of crisis, that need doesn't go away. In fact, it's probably heightened by the circumstances that children find themselves in. IPA has worked in two main ways really in supporting access to play for children in crisis. The first is through our network of members throughout the world who are working all the time on promoting and supporting children's right to play, sometimes through direct provision and sometimes through promoting and advocacy activities. The second area in which we've worked has been on high-level advocacy for children's right to play. IPA led the call for the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child to issue a general comment on Article 31. Article 31 is children's right to rest, leisure, play, cultural life and the arts.
sights you thought you'd never see. But the rivers and the breeze will reach out to rescue me. Where the sun is shining bright and the birds are flying high. This world is the place we call home. Let us play, let us shine, all our hopes are still alive. Let us show you what the colors do in life. We will sing, we will dance, give it just another glance, and you'll sing along with us for one more chance. Every night in my bed I dream of clouds, dust, trees, running, playing and laughing to the trees. Feeling free, friends, freedom, fun's all we want. Play we need, there's nothing else that we need. Don't you know, it hasn't been easy for me. It's only you say you believe. Let us play, let us shine, all our hopes are still alive. Let us show you what the colors do in life. We will sing, we will dance, give it just another glance, and you'll sing along with us for one more chance. Secret places hide and seek, sights you thought you'd never see. But the rivers and the breeze will reach out to rescue me. Where the sun is shining bright and the birds are flying high. This world is the place we call home. Dark skies have faded off, and now it's shining perfectly.
Play emerged as a living resource that allowed children to not only regain and retain normalcy under the most difficult circumstances, but find magic and healing. Reducing risks in children's lives, ensuring their safety while providing access to free play, it is a challenge that the duty bearers of children must accept.
All our hopes are still alive. Let us show you what the colors do in life. We will sing, we will dance, give it just another glance, and you'll sing along with us for one more chance. Let us play, let us shine, all our hopes are still alive. Let us show you what the colors do in life. We will sing, we will dance, give it just another glance, and you'll sing along with us for one more chance. Let us sing and we'll dance, give it just another chance. We will sing and we'll dance, give it just another chance. Let us sing and we'll dance, give it just another chance. We will sing and we'll dance, give it just another
Good morning. It is my absolute pleasure to
give this overview of IPA's Access to Play in Crisis research. I don't really need to say much after the film, which really gives such a really nice flavor of the work that happened in these 6 countries. Basically, when we conceived of this project, we had 2 main goals. We wanted to understand what are the play needs of children who are living in different situations of crisis, and we also wanted to increase our own knowledge about practical applications on promoting right to play in these situations of crisis. As you saw in the film just now, we had 6 different crisis situations in 6 different countries that we had chosen, but broadly, they fell in 3 categories. The first one being natural disaster, the situations that we chose in Japan and Nepal, post-earthquake, post-tsunami kind of contexts, humanitarian crisis in the situation in Lebanon, the protracted crisis of Syrian refugees, as well as in the much longer entrenched crisis of the Roma populations living in racially mixed neighborhoods in Istanbul. And in India and Thailand, the crisis is really an everyday crisis of living in poverty, in really hazardous environments, particularly for migrant communities living in slums and squatter settlements in the context of Thailand and India. For the research, we had developed several tools. We had a wonderful expert panel that guided this research. With their help and mentoring, we developed some 6 child-friendly tools for working directly with children. Some of them included risk mapping in the environment where children mapped safe and unsafe spaces, taking researchers on child-led walks. In some of the cases, the environments were so unsafe, the researchers in some cases actually had near-death encounters, particularly on the railway track in Calcutta, that we really didn't want to put the researchers or the children in harm's way. We actually took them to a safe space where children role-played or created a simulated environment of their actual play spaces in very unsafe areas in their locality. Other than these tools, there were 2 other methods which gave us very, very rich insights into children's play worlds, most important being systematic observations by researchers. We developed some observation checklists to help researchers document children's play behaviors and play episodes as they watch them over these 2-3 months, as well as doing key informant interviews with parents, with other community members, local governments, community-based NGOs and other organizations who were responsible for delivering services to children, not necessarily play, but any other services, because promoting right to play was not really happening in most of these contexts. Children's participation in research was very critical for us. Because of the kind of context we were working in, getting access to children was not easy. So we had to adopt a convenient sampling strategy. We had to get informed consent from both parents as well as children who participated in the research. We broadly divided children according to 3 age groups: children under 10 years, 11 to 14 years, and then 15 to 18 years. We worked with boys and girls in equal numbers. We told our researchers that you should try and work with at least 35 to 40 kids in each of your research sites. Even though we had 6 countries, we had 13 unique sites across these 6 countries. So overall, we managed to work with more than 300 children across these 13 sites. The findings of this research, some of them did not really surprise us. We knew from literature and our own experience of working with children in difficult situations, but some of the findings did surprise us quite a bit. The youngest children, as well as girls, typically played close to home, even though that meant that space that they were playing was a very, very unsafe space, as in the context of Kolkata, where they were the favorite play space of the youngest children and girls was the railway track. Their huts were like barely 3 feet away from the railway track on either side. And parents actually believed this is the safest place for children to play. They had access to a river on the other side that they did not encourage children to go to at all because the river was unpredictable. And so this completely challenged our notions of risk and what we perceive as high-risk environments, because risks are very, very relative to how parents perceive them in relation to their everyday life. From about the age of 8 years, boys typically move away from the home base. They seek out abandoned buildings and factories and riversides. We saw that in Thailand. They would go near the river. There was this space that was like really scary for us to go to even during the daytime. There were these giant buildings with, overgrowth inside and trees growing inside, and there was dark and damp, but that was a favorite play space. And these boys would actually run away and try and get there at every possible opportunity that they could find. Adolescent girls, typically across all the research sites, did not have as much opportunity to play or permission to play. And in many cases, they themselves believed that they had now grown up and play belonged to younger children, that they shouldn't be playing. Though most of our sites were urban sites. We had a few rural sites. In Thailand, where we worked with a Burmese community very close to the Burma border up north in Thailand. It was a rural site. It was one of the few places where we found adolescent girls, even up to the age of 18, playing very freely along with boys in the fields outside their neighborhoods. And this was because parents were working away from the home base for very long hours. They were unsupervised, and they had access to these fields and vast open spaces with a lot of natural resources, which allowed them to play very, very freely. Nature of space pretty much influenced the nature of play everywhere. In the contexts where we found the most free play, these were actually the poorest communities that we worked with, whether in India or in Nepal. In the case of Nepal, after the earthquake, unlike Japan, people were very much responsible for rebuilding and reconstruction. In Japan, the government was responsible for that. So here, people lived outside in makeshift tents that they themselves created for months, in fact, years now. Some of them are still living in those kind of makeshift shelters because their money for rebuilding hadn't come through, and for various other reasons of political instability, et cetera, in the country. So parents actually encouraged the youngest children to seek out safe open spaces where they can in their villages and play with their friends, while they, along with their older children, got busy in rebuilding their homes and communities. So what did these children play? There was so much loose parts in the debris around them. They were busy building homes and settlements. They were actually doing what they were seeing around them happening. So play actually very much simulates life and the social conditions. And they were role-playing, all kinds of situations in the homes that they were creating. In Calcutta, too, in this context, very, very poor community, they are illegal migrants. For 3 generations, they have lived in informality and illegality in these quarter settlements for various reasons. There were abundant loose parts in their environment. So children were busy constructing things. They were busy simulating different kinds of games. You can read about some of these case studies in the Playwrights magazine as well as in the report. So what we learned, that greater were the risks in children's environments, riskier was the play of children in many ways. The social and the cultural context very much influenced the nature of play as well. In Turkey, where children were, one of our neighborhoods was actually perceived as one of the most unsafe neighborhoods in Istanbul, we saw children engaging in very, very aggressive play. They were, boys especially, they were acting like the men around them. And the only way they knew how to do that was to act tough, to survive in that really, really tough environment. In Calcutta, because these kids were growing up very close to a potter, very famous potter community, and there was so much mud available to them next to the river, they constantly built things, including idols, and one of their games was a worship game that they would play on the river using these things that they made. Education pressure in Japan and Turkey, very much the #1 enemy of children's play, free play. But in many other contexts, our children were not going to school regularly, but still they did not have time to play because many of them were engaged in paid and unpaid work. Some of these children that we talked to, some of the girls in Kolkata who were responsible for actually a lot of domestic work, they would be taking utensils and clothes to the riverbank to wash, and suddenly they had a lot of materials. And we saw some of the most amazing forms of pretend play happening with those materials that they had with them. In the case of Thailand, the children who worked in factory settings said how they played in the gaps of their work using the metal drums that they were making, etc. One of the case examples that we found in Kolkata that really, really surprised and really moved us in a way was these 8-year-old boys would be making this raft to sail on the river. And these are poor kids. Where do they find the material to build this raft? Right next to the squatter settlement was a crematorium. As in the Hindu culture, the dead bodies would be carried on these cots, and they had a mat on them. And so after cremation, the cot and the mats would be discarded. So these kids would get into this crematorium, take those discarded mats, bring them back, and they would create these large bags out of them. They'll sew them. And then twice a week, they would be going to these 2 fish markets in the city, quite far. They'll go walking, and they'll bring back these big styrofoam pieces, which were discarded by the fish sellers. They would be packing fish in them. And they would stuff those bags with the styrofoam pieces, and they'll make their raft. They call it a trawler. First, they'll take it for a test run along the bank. Once they're satisfied, then they will sail away with it. And one of their preoccupation is to protect this trawler from adults who would want to steal it and also go out and sail into the river. So this is perhaps the strongest form of resilience that we have seen. India, of course, didn't have any intervention in play in this particular context. In Japan, we saw the most interventions in the post-disaster context. There were a lot of escalation of mobile play opportunities through play cards and pop-up play spaces in the temporary housing sites, etc. But the scale of the disaster was such that these examples were not enough to reach most children. It needs more scaling up. There were 8 adventure playgrounds that were created in Ishinomaki city alone. There was a wonderful center called Right, set up by Save the Children, where we actually got access to children for doing the research. Our colleagues from Thailand will talk about the wonderful examples that they have created, this converting vacant spaces into this community-built play spaces, which is really what the community is called. This is the best place, because it has suddenly transformed the social and play lives of the community. So in a way, this is now out, this research report. We have detailed recommendations, and the findings are here. You'll find that. But what I think we learned was this tremendous capacity of children to create opportunities for themselves even when they had literally nothing in their lives. But they managed to invent things. They were so creative in creating time, space, resourcing play in whatever way they can. If this is not resilience, then I don't know what is. This is through play, children actually rose above their disadvantage, and they learn to manage stress while engaging in these different activities every day, every moment that they could get away from their reality. So with that, I'm going to now allow our other participants to share their wonderful experiences and not take much more of your time. Thank you.
สวัสดีค่ะ You can say like me in Thailand. Everyone, สวัสดีค่ะ In Thailand case, we research about the children in migrant workers community. You know, in the past 30 years, Thailand become the destination of neighboring country. The biggest group come from Burma. Now they call Myanmar, and come from Cambodia and Laos. Most of them are allowed to work in Thailand in the legal channel, but some of them smuggle in Thailand to work illegally. You can see this is the situation of their living in a small community. This is the Burmese in urban and in rural area. They come with their family, and many children were born in Thailand, and some of children never been back to their origin country, so some cannot speak Cambodia or Burmese language. They just speak Thai and become the illegal or no paper, no legal status for the children. And this is the community of the Cambodian migrant workers. They rent very small room and very crowded in the room, in the small room. Some room, there are 10 members in the same small room. This crisis affects children a lot because the insecurity of their life and hard work to make ends meet, and living in the crowded and unhealthy situation, and lack of legal status or work permit, so they become the illegal migrant. So they fear of the police or the authority, so they cannot allow the children to go far away from the home, or they cannot go outside the area that the government allows. They are avoiding to have the conflict with the Thai people who live in the same area or close area, because it will cause a lot of trouble for them. Other reasons that prevent the children from access to play. You can see that the boy, the young boy, he is a child labor who work in the factories nearby. He always tired and exhausted after long hours of working, so he not want to play. And another boy not allowed to go out of the rent room, and some small children are locked in the room when the parents go far away for work, and the parents always work late at night, so some children are locked in the room all days. And unsafe space surrounding the area. You can see the transport truck surrounding. And another reason is some case we see that teen parents at the young age, so they lost their life on play. The children, even in this crisis, they can create the opportunity to play. They collect the garbage or the trash from the wastewater or from the garbage around the house and play with it. or play while the parent working in the construction site. The 3 boys, they use the plastic bottle and fill with the water as his car, tie up with the rope and play with like a cars. And the 2 young boys playing in the construction site while parents working around this area. The children always create their opportunity to play by sneaking out to play in the prohibited area, which the most area that they like to play. You can see the playground in school with the score that the teacher not allow the children to play with the broken equipment, but they like to play in that area too. And the small children climb up the truck, and then when the adult approach them, they run away and come back again when the adult go away. And they imagine as the beast just chase them and they run away from the ghost or the beast, something like that. This is how they play in the construction site. And the little boys also in the Burmese community with the abandoned salt storage. This is how the children create their own opportunity, adapt the parental restriction and play in the approved place, like in the kitchen. They can adapt play like a cooking play or invent toy for education to satisfy the parent, and then they can play another thing else. This is how they create their opportunity. This is one case that's very special and wonderful. And 6-year-old boy, the Burmese boy who lived near the border, Thai and Burmese border, he lived in the big family with 10 members in the same roof, the small house, and he not allowed to go far away and no access to school. So he play around this area and collect the garbage to make the music instrument. He collect the bowl, the plastic bowl or the dishes, the old dishes, to make his music instrument. And when parents saw this kind of play, encouraged the parent to support him. His father built the wooden box to keep his stick for the instrument, for the music instrument. That made him feel very, very happy, and he found himself that he liked music very much. This is kind of innovation among the crises. The children themselves saw that play is so important for them in their own perspective. The young girl, they feel very happy and enjoy themselves when play, and enjoy the studying also. For the child labor, the way they play is the way they escape from boring, or it can be the relaxing time from the hard work or long working in the factories. This is how the children perspective on play is very nice. The role of the adult in Thailand on the crisis is quite limited because they understand play as a sport or the activity that adult provide for the children, but not understand the free play deeply. So we need many effort or networking to raise awareness among the organization or among the public, or even in the international organization who work cross-border from neighboring country. And to play aspect, we propose the promoting cultural play, which provide the children sense of self-esteem or dignity, or encourage the child participation, because they far away from home and in the alienate in other country. This is very, very important for the children to play in cultural way, or they found that somebody, they have the root country, origin of country, the culture still there even in Thailand. This is our purpose. I will stop my presentation with a video that you can see the boy with his music instrument, please. Yeah, you can hear the adult voice. All right. Thank you. ขอบคุณค่ะ
I find that little video clip quite reminiscent of the video clips that we were watching yesterday, just in a very, very different time and context. Thanks so much to Kemporn for that wonderful presentation and the illuminating insights that it provided us. Our next speaker, researcher from the team is Shalini Gupta, who's from our team in India.
Good morning. Okay, so I'll be talking briefly about our findings in Kolkata. Kolkata is the capital of West Bengal, a state in India. Our work was mainly in a ward which was called number 20 and popularly known as Nimtala Ghat under Kolkata Municipal Corporation. The place where we did the research was basically a squatter settlement. So this is the study area, and if you you can see here that there is the river Ganges and there is a railway track. So the squatter settlement is right in between and along the railway track. It is a single railway line on the western banks of river Ganges. If I can speak briefly about the squatter settlement, it has approximately 300 shanties, which are makeshift huts. The size of each of these makeshift huts is about 6 to 8 feet. So it's a very small area and is occupied by family of 8 to 10 members with an average of 3 children per family. So a really very small space for an entire family to stay within the space. The squatter settlement is around 100 to 150 years old, and people have been staying in this area for over 3 generations. They have been living here without any basic amenities such as drinking water, toilet facilities, or any health facilities. Still, they prefer to stay in this area because it's closer to their workplaces, and being very poor, they cannot really afford to shift to a better location. So the study was mainly conducted with 40 children, and amongst the 40 children, there were 18 girls and 22 boys. Approximately the age range was 6 to 14 years, and the duration of the study was only 3 months, the winter season in Calcutta, which was from December 2016 to February 2017. So the basic findings of the study was the play spaces. What we noticed was the children in this area had 3 major play spaces. The river Ganges, both the banks of the river Ganges and also in the water. The Strand Bank Road, which is the road that falls in between the railway track and the river Ganges. So it's not a very big road, it's a thin road, but which is very congested. It's quite a congested road. And the third place was a railway track, so the children keep on playing on the track and on both the sides of the track. Okay, so a few glimpses of the play spaces. All of these play spaces have a risk factor involved in it. If we talk about the railway track, if you see the picture, we notice a bend in the railway track. Though it is a single line, approximately all throughout the day, there are 36 trains that passes along this railway track. There is supposed to be a hooter which sounds an alarm as soon as the train approaches, but often during our investigation, we did not hear the hooter go off. And moreover, the bend along the northern side of the track makes the train invisible till it actually approaches over you. So you can see the picture that the train is bending, and you just see it when the train is in front of you. Along the river bank, the river Ganges is quite a wide river, and West Bengal being at the mouth of Bay of Bengal, so it has a lot of force in the water also. There are tidal borings, so there are high tides and low tides which make it even riskier. The water levels remain unpredictable, but strangely enough, the children did not see this as a risk factor. They are very much aware of the tidal timings, and they exactly get into the water when it's safe for them. So it is a self-taught practice of the children. The road, which is the third picture, is like you can see the trucks and the cars standing. They move out, and often they do not have any indicators or sounds when they are moving out onto the road. So the children adjust and play on this road also. Okay, so types of play. There are different kinds of games which the children have devised themselves, because there is, they don't have any kind of so-called toys to play with. So whatever is available in the surrounding, whatever play spaces they get around them, they play in those spaces with the available resources around them. So if we see the pictures again, we see like basically walking on the tracks itself is a game. Children have this wheeled carts, which they again prepared themselves by bringing in scrap material, wheels, and tin plates and ropes. They weld it themselves, they tie it with ropes, and they make it they pull it along the tracks like a cart. So that is also a game. Small cycles is also used as a vehicle. And if you see the last picture, like even walking down the track with a piece of stick or a bottle makes a game. So there are a lot of other games that they play along the tracks. Along the tracks is the easiest and the safest place as the parents suppose it to be, because the squatter settlement is along the tracks beside it, and the parents find it easier to keep an eye on the children when they are playing there. So obviously when the children grow a bit older, they find it conducive to move away from the eyesight of their parents, and they go to the river banks, which is away from the squatter settlement, to play. So the general age range that the children play on the railway tracks is from 0 to about 5 to 6 years. After that, they move to the river Ganges or to the roads. One interesting thing about the railway track was, though we see this also a very risky zone because there is this train movement and without hooter, there are chances of accidents, but till date there has been no accidents. So this is something that we perceive as risky, and it is really risky. But the children are somehow, they learn the timings of the train. There's one small example where we noticed a mother putting a few months old baby on the track with the railway line being a pillow under her head. So we were quite surprised because this is not a thing that we would even think of doing, like putting such a small child on a railway track. And she said that it's always, since she herself and the child has to keep living in this quarter settlement, it's always better that she learns the movement of the train by hearing the rumbles on the railway track. So that's how the children are prepared from a very young age since they are born. So that is how they adjust to their situation and continue playing. Few more pictures of the little girl who is basically playing with the stones and the sand that is kept within the slippers of the railway track. On the road, various types of games like wheels. There are some common games called Bagbandi in our local language. The other interesting thing is Bagbandi needs specific pieces to be played with, which are not available to the children. So what they do instead is they collect colorful bottle caps and they play Bagbandi with it. So resourcing materials. Resourcing materials from the river bank to play with, mud balls, which is the last picture. And the little girl she is selling the leaf plates, leaf bowls. But she finds play, she actually mingles play with her work. So she is like in a role play, like an adult, and she's sitting there and selling so both the work and the play goes on together. Okay, by the riverside. So a look at the riverside, you can see how dirty it is. It's really dirty and very unhygienic. And the sad thing is that the Ganges water is used for both drinking and washing purposes by the residents of this quarter. The children still manage to play in these places, and the common games are like playing balls, playing wheels, playing lattu. And the girls, okay, there is a difference between the girls' play and the boys' play that we have noticed here. Something was very funny. The girls kept on telling us that the boys were not allowed in their play. And even while recording or taking pictures, if there was a boy who wanted to take a picture, they were not allowed. So the girls had to go in to take their pictures. So the girls go to a very secret place, which is also a ghat or immersion ghat that we call, where the idols are immersed. So they have a different ghat for themselves. And the ghat is not open for public. So you actually have to cross a wall to reach the ghat. And the little girls cross the wall, reach the ghat, and they play two very interesting games. One is called the Biye Shadi, which is a marriage game. And it's an extensive role play because all the players are girls, but they'll be playing the role of a boy and a girl with all the Hindu marriage practices, starting from before marriage till after marriage. We call it the Suhag Raat, like after marriage, whatever is done. And we even saw it to the extent like after marriage, they get into a dark place and they lie down and cover themselves with a cloth. So to that extent, the role play is done. But remember, the boys are not allowed there. Okay. The boys have accepted the fact, and they also sometimes do not allow the girls to play with them. So that's understood. The boys mainly play with the rafts that Sudeshna has already spoken about. the rafts are made by themselves, and so rafts or trawlers as we call it, they make it themselves with the salvage materials, and they do a test drive and float on it. Very rarely have we found girls on the rafts or the trawlers. There was only one instance where we saw a girl jump on the trawler, and she seemed a pro because the way of her jumping seemed that she had practiced enough. But as soon as she jumped into the trawler, she was actually pulled out by an adult. So, which makes us think that possibly she does get the time when the adult is not looking at her to practice jumping into the trawler and swimming out with the boys, but most of the cases it is the boys who make use of the trawler. The interesting thing about the trawler is, as you notice in the middle picture or in the last picture, that the trawler is in the middle of the river, and it's quite a huge river. The pictures look very scary, and really it is very scary, because with the tides, the trawlers can get drowned or they may foul of it. But accidents has never happened. Though the boys said that they are not afraid of the tide or the river, what they are afraid of is there are Ganges dolphins in the river Ganges. And these dolphins often we think like they are also interested in children and come to play with them. So often what they do is, in their excitement, they overturn the trawlers. So the children really have to swim back to the shore. And the children are very good swimmers, both the boys and the girls. So they do not get drowned. Okay, so major findings, as we have already extensively spoken about it, I'm not getting into the details. In the Calcutta scenario, time is not at all a factor because education is not a priority over there. So children are often left alone they get time to play, but they have to do the household chores and the daily activities to support their parents. So the girls, there is a gender thing to it. The girls do not get much time because they are allowed to play only after they complete their household chores. Regarding the age, till the age of 14, okay, so that is very important because till the age of 14 is considered to be the play age. After the age of 14, children are not allowed, they are not allowed to play also, and there is something within them also, they accept the fact that after the age of 14 you don't play. Two main reasons, because girls get into this extensive domestic work and the boys, to support their parents, get into the paid work. Permission, parents neither encourage or discourage the children to play, though we have found one or two parents really supporting play by building small temples to play idol worship, etc. Younger children till 6 years are not allowed out of sight, so they keep on playing along the railway tracks. And older girls above 7 years are only allowed to play after they complete their housework. Okay, as in all the crisis contexts, children absolutely have no access to formal play spaces. Interestingly, in our area, there are no open spaces for children to play. So they have expressed their desire for a large open space where they can play. And in our context, we think that the river Ganga happens to be the only open space that is available to them. So that is why they take the risk of going into the river on the trawler. So everything makes a toy for them, as I've already said. There is no intervention from the adults, so it is completely up to the child to salvage the materials, figure out where to play and how to play the game. And they exhibit enormous creativity in resourcing the resources, again going back to the example of creating the trawler. And if we see the pictures like using of plastic bottle caps, muds collected from the river, even the match boxes, colorful match boxes, are used as toys by the children. So with this, I complete my presentation, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shalini. I guess you can imagine how we felt as these findings were emerging, that the research teams managed to get together twice in the course of the project, at the beginning and towards the end. And I think we were all kind of in awe of what we were hearing about these children and the creativity and resourcefulness that they brought to play and what we can learn from them. And one of the other nice things about it was that our research teams were all learning from each other all the way through as well. So, that was another lovely dimension. So we're on our last example now, which is going to be presented from the IPA Japan research team, and presenting that on their behalf is our friend from Japan, Isami Kinoshita.
Hi, good morning. So at first, I'd like to say this research was conducted not only by me, and also by the team. Mari was over there, and she was not the IPA member, but from this research, she became the membership. And so I contributed to increase one member. And Hitoshi, and he plays as a treasurer. That he is a play worker. Might be that treasurer is the most difficult work for play worker. But he did very well. And Charlie is my PhD student, and so he was very good to facilitate children. And also, this time, the Kumi Tashiro, she could not come, but she initiated this research to join this research. I was involved her. And then the first meeting she was, she became the officer of the government, and she became very busy, and then so. And also this time the disaster area, the northern Japan, and far away from Tokyo, and our team is Tokyo. Then so NGOs and Ishinomaki City, and they collaborated together with us. And so that is the reason why we selected Ishinomaki. Also the other reason, and in Miyagi Prefecture, the Ishinomaki is the biggest such a damaged city. And then so that one part of the disaster area, and then please consider that is only one part. Okay, shall start this? Okay, that already 6 years ago, do you remember that earthquake that was happened, which was said once 1,000 years? It happened, such a big earthquake and such a big tsunami. So very big threat for us after that. And then so wide range, and Ishinomaki is one part. And then so almost 20,000 people died and missing. So then, and Ishinomaki City, from the interview research, structured by Sudeshuna, and we made an interview, senior high school students and junior high school and primary school. And the interview is to make drawing the mental map, remembering 6 years ago, and that way, and today. And then this guy, at that time of the research, is 16 years old, but that remember that time was 10 years. And then he had to be at first that evacuation shelter a few days after the disaster. And it's a very high density, and it's a sleep, and they had to be had to keep in silent, yeah. And then the frustration, that's all, frustrated. And then one night, he escaped to go outside in the midnight and found a golf stick. And then he hit the pieces of debris, yeah. And so he told us, I could spit out the frustration. In that way, the play has such kind of role. And that in that way, mental map, remembering that. And could you see that the range of the playing area, not so wide, and so very much restricted. And then after the shelter, evacuation shelter, the temporary houses, after 6 months, they are living. But such kind of temporary houses were built using parks and school ground. It means that so children lost their playing space. And along that temporary houses, there are not enough playgrounds. And then in that picture, that the children playing, but the noise was claimed. In that way, many restrictions happen. And then, so interventions. My colleagues of that sort of that mobile play, Sato Hoshino, his nickname is Kirby. So monthly, 2 or 3 times, he visited and to support such kind of intervention, the mobile play, and collaborating with the local organization, and the Rainbow Crayon is called. And then so they did. But so many numbers of the temporary housing site, that is limited to those kind of activities. But regularly they are visiting, and children were waiting their visit. In that way, those areas, so children were happy to get a chance to play. And also, the debris so cleaned up and some rough ground. And then we could make the adventure playground using that rough ground. And the owners offered to use. And then such a Koganehama adventure playground. And then that became the place. And so from the interview, one boy told he had to move many times the house and also school. And then he could not have friends. And then finally, the new house he moved. And near his house, he found this place. And then he told, oh, this is my place. So finally, in that way, such kind of intervention has a meaning, important meaning. And from the interview to the children, also such kind of restriction, as I told, the stress they had. And this girl told, so 6th grade at that time, and the primary school, and they explored. They were restricted to play in the temporary housing and so on. And then finally, they escaped and to explored the secret place. This was a secret place under the bridge, near the river. At that time, river, so that was not the place for children to play. Already today, children said, don't go to river, don't play in the river. So previously we could play, but now not only that disaster area, rural area, children told, such kind of restriction. That's also the topic, risk and safety. And so these girls could play here, and so that was secret to parents or the adults, and fishing. But finally found, and they could not go. So restriction came. And one of the interventions is like that. And so disaster areas, many NGOs, international NGOs also supported. And then this is a children's center, which was built by the support of Save the Children Japan, coordinating with the company and whiskey company, donated the fee to build this center. And Save the Children also, they're also agency of the right of child, and so children's participation. It's a nice process they did, a fantastic work, and the children were very much proud of. And this became the center children gather. And also the international networking. And so, and Ishinomaki City, 1.5 years later after the disaster, and Hitoshi is also, and my colleague Kirby and so, they collaborate with the local NGOs to organize street play and mini Munich, mini Ishinomaki. It's so using the street. This became the first time in the downtown, so many children came after the disaster. And then so NGOs very much encouraged to do. And then this was held every year. And of course, street play from the influence of UK experience. And the mini, so German. And also German friends and Heidelberg, Bruckner, and so Deutsches Kinderhilfswerk supported to fundraising. And 5 million yen they donated. And so in that way. And also the British friends and colleagues and so on, and in such a youth radio, and we organize a workshop and like that. And then so finally, yes, as a result, as a conclusion, so what we learned as a lesson, the role of adults, and so as now it's the time, okay, sorry. And so the adult's role is such kind of understanding the importance of children play. And gathering place, and so mobile play. But very interesting things happened from the interview. This 13 years old girl told what is when we asked what is the importance of the play, what was the important point? She answered, imagination. If you could have imagination, you can play everywhere. If you have stress, she was stressed, but as a friend, with the imagination, you can lose your stress. So adults all, please have such a kind of imagination to stress. And that daily life, she always talked with the mother. Mother listened. What happened? Such kind of conversation, communication of the adult's role is very important. Encouraged to have such imagination, to overcome such kind of disaster. That is a resilience of children. So more detail I will talk tomorrow afternoon. And also one point, this time we could not do in Fukushima. Fukushima has different context. So as a kind of this access to play, still Fukushima has a difficulty. So tomorrow afternoon, I will talk about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Isami. And that was a nice one to end on because it started to touch on interventions that are meaningful and appropriate to the context. So our research projects in different parts of the world looked at how children play, but we're also looking at, what is it that adults do that will support or not support children's play. I realise that we're quite tight for time, so I'm wondering whether we might hold our questions and discussion into the talking circle this afternoon, which I understand is in room E1, if people would like to join us for much more of a discussion and debate. We have lots more to tell you and to share, and we'd love to hear the experience of people in the room as well. So I'll just tie up the session with a few remarks before we finish. And one of those was about the interventions and finding interventions that are appropriate and meaningful. And as Isami said, the role of networks. And it was interesting to hear that actually the learning that had come already through IPA connections was something that was then drawn upon in the Japanese context. And we started to discuss this in the final meetings of the project about how we're able to share the ways that work, the ways of working that are really effective for children, but that can be adapted so that they really are appropriate in the context where they're needed. We did see quite a lot of apparent contradictions and challenges to our thinking. And, as you'll have seen, we saw children who were able to play with lots of adventure and challenge, who had secret places to play where adults didn't know what they were up to all the time, who played with water, who played with sand, who dammed rivers, with children who were engaging with the natural world and the physical world around them. So this kind of really challenged our preconceptions about risk and challenge and play and how that, all works together. It made us ask ourselves about how that kind of capital, the play capital that's built by children themselves, how that can be maintained and certainly not eroded when interventions are made that are intended to improve matters for children. But we don't want children's play taken away from them when we try and sort of improve the physical environments, etc. So it suggested to us in IPA that there's a kind of ladder of actions that's needed in order to take us to policy and programmatic change, and that's where we'd be thinking about looking next. There are a number of recommendations that have already come out of the report and the research report and the synthesis, and that's what IPA will be looking at next. Some of them, I think, are for us as IPA to look at. Very many of them are about partnerships and how we can all work together and you know, encouraging and prompting and provoking other people to take some of those actions on so that we are improving matters for children. We, of course, are very happy to hear of anybody who would like to support us or partner us in that endeavour. And I'd just like to finish by saying that the last 2.5 or so years when we've been working on these projects have been illuminating, fascinating. The teams have been absolutely wonderful, and I think you can see from the presentations that, you know, our teams were going in and they were absolutely sensitive and so well informed in order to be able to spend that quiet time with children that revealed those patterns of play, and it just wouldn't have revealed that if, you know, they hadn't had that, you know, ability to just understand the nature of children in the context that they were working in. So we're, as IPA, incredibly grateful to Sudeshna for leading the projects and for all the research teams around the world. And we would love to carry on working in this field of work. So please do, you know, share in this endeavour, and let's see what we can do about access to play in crisis. Thank you very much indeed.